Welcome back to the I Am Passionate podcast. I hope you all are doing well. It is football week, baby. Week 1. I'm super excited. I'm excited as not just as a Ravens fan, but also just as a football fan in general. I just feel like when I have football to look forward to each week, I just think it's an amazing feeling. I love it. It's awesome. And so, also, before diving into the episode a little bit more, I just want to say, I've got an idea that I'm going to do in my next episode. And the reason why I'm not going to do it for this specific episode is simply just because of the day that I didn't have a bad day. It's just, I started recording last night. I stopped just because, I wanted to give myself some time to rest because I knew I would have a long day today. And I'm using the free time I have now to film my podcast. My idea is so that when I talk about each game, when I have video, so like when the Bears play the Packers, whenever week that is, I have that, like a graphic where you'll see Bears versus Packers, and you'll hear the same intro music, you'll hear the music to my intro, but for a transition. Man, it was hard for me to get that out. You'll hear the same music as I use in my intro for transitions, and I'll have that up for a couple of seconds. But the reason why I'm not doing that now is I don't want to be rushed with the editing. That's going to take me a little bit longer. And so I want to be able to do that to my best ability, not feel rushed, and also still put out, good content week to week for those who listen to my podcast. So thank y'all for being patient with me. I'm done yapping. We're going to talk about football. Tonight, we've got Cowboys versus Eagles. I do think this will be a decent game, but I don't really see a world that I think the Cowboys will win this. Yes, getting Kenny Clark in the Micah Parsons trade will help their run defense, but I don't think Kenny Clark is going to be enough, personally. And I don't think the Cowboys roster is bad by any means. I'm more just curious, as in this is their head coach. I don't remember I just remember his last name is Schottenheimer. I believe he's like the son of the more famous or more known head coach Schottenheimer. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But the reason why I just don't see the Cowboys winning this game is simply just because I feel like the Eagles' offensive line is still going to be dominant, whether the Cowboys had Micah Parsons or not, which I get that might be some of the reason as to why, some people aren't reacting some kind of way to, the Cowboys trading Micah Parsons, but I did like the Cowboys' chances with him a little bit more, simply just because Micah Parsons is a game wrecker. Eagles, I believe, left tackle, Jordan Mailata, basically, he said he took, he was took a sigh of relief because you had the game plan for him specifically. Like, don't get me wrong, the other guys on the Cowboys defensive line of defense, those guys are good, but they're not Micah Parsons level good. Micah Parsons is a top 3 pass rusher. One could argue could be closer to number 1 than he is to number 3, but that's not the point of my conversation. I don't think the Cowboys will be ready to compete for a Super Bowl unless Jerry Jones, he stopped being so prideful and lets somebody else be the GM. Give me the Eagles. I believe, their offensive line, Saquon Barkley, they'll pretty much pick up from where they left off last season. I don't think he's going to get 2,000 yards this season, but I still think he's going to have a really good season. My score prediction is 35-17 Eagles. Moving on to the Friday game, and see kind of in that little moment at the end when I started talking about, the Thursday, tonight's game versus Friday, that's where the music would be. But Friday's game, Chargers versus Chiefs. This game is in Brazil. I do think this would be a better game than the Thursday Night Football game, simply just because I feel like as of right now, I kind of trust the Chargers a little bit more than the Cowboys. Like, I feel like the Chargers play the Chiefs a little bit better than Dallas has been playing the Eagles, which in more recent history, not, of all time, because I cannot tell you the last time I've seen the Chargers beat the Chiefs, but, in recent years, the Cowboys have beaten the Eagles. But regardless, I think this game was going to be better. I believe the Chiefs they're going to struggle a little bit without, Rashee Rice, which I believe that'll give the Chargers a chance, just because, yes, their offense is still good without Rashee Rice, but I feel like he's just that immediate threat. I feel like he's kind of the true number one target in the offense. Like, I don't think Travis Kelce is that number one guy anymore. He's still a guy that you need to watch out for and respect, but I don't think he's that number one target. I think the Chargers can make this game interesting, but they have to play to win immediately. I'm not saying you've got to go for it on every fourth down. You've got to take care of the ball. You've got to make the big plays, and also you got to take away the football from Patrick Mahomes. But the reason why I don't think the Chargers are going to win, I kind of don't trust their wide receiver core. Like, yes, they have Ladd McConkey. I saw the depth chart. Quentin Johnson's the number 2, which I don't really think he's that good of a receiver. I'm sorry. You've got Keenan Allen. You brought him back, and he's still a good receiver. I believe he's probably up there for the Chargers, like all-time leading in certain categories. But I'm gonna still pick the Chiefs to win this one, 28-20. I think Mahomes is going to, he's gonna kind of have some more like vintage Mahomes moments. The fact that I'm even saying vintage Mahomes, it's kind of wild. He's gonna make some plays that's gonna make you go like, man, what the heck is he on? That's going to be my prediction. Give me the Chiefs 28-20. So now for the Sunday games. So for the Sunday games, starting off with the Dolphins versus Colts. The Colts, I'd say they have a well-rounded team. They got a good running back in Jonathan Taylor. They've got a good wide receiver room in Michael Pittman Jr. They have Adonai Mitchell, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, and they drafted the Penn State tight end, I believe, Tyler Warren. I believe that's his name. The Colts do have a good O-line, and they have a decent defense. The literal question of their season, like if their season goes by well or if it goes by bad, it'll simply be because of how the quarterbacks play. Daniel Jones is starting this game. He had won the starting job. If Daniel Jones, plays game manager, he doesn't have to go out and play hero ball. But if he, just plays game manager, if he can throw for, let's just say, about 200 yards, maybe throw a touchdown or two and make a couple plays with his legs, I think the Colts have a good shot at beating a lot of teams. I think they do. And I just think their situation is just weird because, like, both Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson, at times, they'll make the difficult plays look super easy, but the plays that should be super easy, like a wide open layup in basketball, they break. They just make that look just insanely difficult. So that's just my thing. And the Dolphins are in an awkward position because over the preseason, I've been talking about how I feel like their head coach might be somebody who gets fired early, almost kind of like a scapegoatish, even though that, throughout the offseason, basically there have been reports saying that, that locker room has to be won back. It's a toxic locker room situation. Part of it is also because of Tyreek Hill, his comments at the end of last season saying how he wants out. And it's a weird situation. But I do still think they have a decent offense. They have 2 of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL, and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They had Devon Achane, an insanely fast running back. They just drafted Ollie Gordon, who should be their short yardage running back. If Tua can stay healthy, I think they'll at least have a chance to, make their season interesting. But I think whoever wins this game, it's not going to be because of the pass. I think it's going to be because of the run. I think the trenches are going to decide this game. I think, the trenches, if whoever can establish the run first will make it easier on basically Tua or Daniel Jones. It'll make it easier on them so that they don't have to go play hero ball. Give me the Colts, 24-14. The other reason why I'm saying that is I think Jonathan Taylor will have a good game. He'll have a good, I think he'll have a good season this year. Steelers versus Jets. Another game where basically both these teams are in a weird position to me because I've been seeing a lot on my TikTok, my For You page, that basically people, they're picking the Steelers to have a below 500 season this year. If that happens, it'd be Mike Tomlin's first. The thing, though, these TikTokers have been saying it, like they said it in like years past. It didn't happen. And I saw something interesting that basically, if you look at some of the more weird quarterbacks that the Steelers would have had, play over the last 10 years, like Landry Jones, Doug Hodges, would have had Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph. Um, just some of those guys. And Mike Tomlin still has a winning record, with all the quarterbacks that I just named, which that is just kind of crazy to think about, but it's true. The Steelers are kind of hoping to get some vintage Aaron Rodgers, while the Jets are hoping to unlock Justin Fields. And I saw from, I believe, JAS football. They used to be JPA football on Instagram. I apologize if I'm butchering that, Instagram handle. Basically, the Jets are going to be a run team, and then basically, like, they're going to try to lean on their strengths and then basically open up the offense a little bit more, which I think it's a valid strategy. But like, I still think you should get some targets to Garrett Wilson just because he's your best receiver on that team. He's a good player. So I think, they still need to have that threat just so that defenses respect Garrett Wilson. But I don't think they need to do anything crazy. I think more so both of these teams need to also play game manager. Even though that I think both these teams have great defenses. And so I think it's going to be who will take better care of the ball between Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields, and also between like the other players, like not having a running back or receiver fumble in that situation. But the reason why I'm going to take Aaron Rodgers to be a better game manager this Sunday is simply just because I think the Steelers defense will be able to make a play when it matters most. Whether it's, they, trick Justin Fields, or maybe, just they just make a play when they need to. However, they'll make a play. That's just what I think. I will always kind of have this more of a positive outlook to the Steelers until they have that disaster of a season. Give me the Steelers 20-16. Panthers versus Jags. I'm very, very excited to see, Panthers quarterback Bryce Young after last season. He, got benched, came back, and he just was playing like a completely different person. And this will be his first chance, since then, obviously, to be able to put together a full season's worth of games just to show people why he was the number one overall pick, because people were hating on him immediately. They forget that. They basically traded his best pass catcher in DJ Moore to the Bears, traded away their future. So, he had it rough, and now it's starting to look up a little bit. I don't know if this is going to be that amazing season for the Panthers as a whole, but I think they'll show some people that they're not messing around. And, they got, like Tedero McMillan from Arizona. I believe that's where he went to school. They've got Xavier Legette. They've got some guys on offense, just to kind of see how they, mesh with, Bryce Young. For the Jags, I'm just interested to see how much Travis Hunter plays. I know he's listed as the Jaguars, like, starting wide receiver, and he's listed as a backup DB, but I wouldn't hold it against the Jaguars to, let's just say, if there's a moment in the game on defense, or maybe they just really need a stop, or maybe if one of the Jaguars DBs just cannot guard one of the Panthers wide receivers, maybe you throw in Travis Hunter for a series or two on defense just to see if he can lock down some of these wide receivers. I don't know. We will see. We will see. But my score prediction is going to be 27-13 Panthers. I believe that they'll surprise some people this year. I'm not saying that they're going to be a playoff team, but I do think they will surprise some people. Cardinals versus the Saints. I feel like the Saints quarterback room, I feel like they're all on a short leash, with many of them not having a lot of experience. Spencer Rattler, I believe, is going to be the one starting this game, which, I mean, I do believe that's the right choice for them, but I just think the organization as a whole is just kind of just in a weird spot, and better hope Alvin Kamara has like an MVP caliber season. Otherwise, the Saints just might not be that interesting of a team to watch this year. For Arizona, I do think they have a chance to compete. I'm not sure they're going to, I don't think they're going to win their division or anything, but I think, as Kyler Murray stays healthy, I think they'll always, have a shot personally. The thing is, I don't really like their head coach. I think, that'll hold them back at times. Like, they might have some games where maybe they'll lose them this season. And, like, it might be because of the head coach. Do I think that this will be one of those games? No, I do not. I do not think they'll struggle against the Saints. Give me the Cardinals 28-10. The Giants versus the Commanders. I do think this will be an interesting game because I think the Giants' defensive line will win them some games this year. They added, Abdul Carter. They've got Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, which, has been being talked about all offseason as just a great pass rush. What I'm a little bit more curious about with the Giants is Are they going to keep three quarterbacks for long just because Jackson Dart is Russell Wilson's backup? And so Jameis Winston is the third string? Will there be a team to trade for Jameis Winston? I don't know. I just think maybe it should be considered. And so for the Commanders, my biggest question, will Jaden Daniels beat the sophomore slump? I do, because I think he's in a good situation where I think, that coaching staff is basically catered around Jaden Daniels' skill set, playing to his strengths, playing a little bit more fast. I believe last season they went a lot of no huddle and they just catered to him. So I think as long as they continue to do that, I think he'll, continue to progress as a, NFL quarterback. And also, I do think getting Laremy Tunsil, even though he's older, I still think he's a great offensive lineman. And I think it'll help, keep Jaden Daniels upright in the pocket or allow him to do those off-script plays. Give me the Commanders in a close one, 31-28. I believe Jaden Daniels will lead the Commanders on a 2-minute drill to win the game. I believe they will get a touchdown in basically the final moments of the game, and basically the Giants will be in a Hail Mary situation, and I don't think it's going to get caught. Moving on to the Buccaneers versus the Falcons. Last year, the Falcons won both games against Tampa. I'm not sure I see that happening this year, only because, I'm more curious about, Michael Penix Jr., because last offseason, a lot of people were talking about how they believed the Falcons were true contenders because of Kirk Cousins. I'm not going to lie. I kind of thought they would have been better than what they ended up being, but that's beside the point. I do think this would be a good game because division opponents always have good games, in my opinion. Like, specifically, these two teams always play each other pretty well. And for the Bucs, I get the feeling this season will be like their best offensive season with Baker Mayfield as their QB. I think once Chris Godwin comes back, I think Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Emeka Egbuka will just be a great wide receiver room. I think it'll be one of the best wide receiver rooms in the league. And I think, their rookie wide receiver from Ohio State, wide receiver U right now, them and LSU. But I believe he'll have a great, first game in the NFL. Give me the Bucs, 34-23. Moving on to the Bengals versus Browns. I did a little bit more research for this one just because I had heard said about this. So I went on to StatMuse just to see, because I had heard before that Joe Burrow struggles against the Browns, and I was a little curious about it. In 8 games against the Browns, Joe Burrow's 3-5. He lost his first 4. Then in his last 4, he's 3-1. Joe Flacco against the Bengals all time is 9-12. With all of those games except for the most recent one basically being when he was the Ravens quarterback. I feel like unless the Bengals defense just shows up, maybe they drink Michael's secret stuff from the first Space Jam movie. I don't know. I think I got the Browns winning this game. I don't trust the Bengals defense to get a stop, and I get it. The Browns offense doesn't really have a whole lot of crazy players. They still got Jerry Jeudy. They have Njoku. They've got a decent offensive line, and we're gonna see how their running back Quinton Junkins, which him and they got a couple other guys, see how they play. But I do expect this to be a shootout, which was basically described the Bengals season last year. Give the Browns 35-31. Yes, I think the Browns are going to let up, some points because it's Joe Burrow. Raiders versus Patriots. I feel like these two teams are the teams I heard the most about in the offseason. The Patriots just because of, second-year QB Drake May. And, the Raiders because they got Pete Carroll. They got Geno Smith. They, drafted Ashton Genty. Also, they have Brock Bowers. But for the Patriots, I'm not exactly sold on Drake May just yet. I mean, I think he has all the potential to be good. And also, I think this team will definitely be well coached on the offensive side of the ball and defensive side of the ball because it's a Mike Vrabel-led team. When he was in Tennessee, all his teams were well coached. And for the Raiders, I think this team could be a very fun team to watch. Brock Bowers, him trying to make himself, I think he can clearly cement himself as a top 3 tight end at the end of the season if, everything goes, let's just say well for the Raiders. I'm going to take the Raiders to win this game 23-16. I think they'll make Drake May look a little flustered. I think, people will pump the brakes a little bit on Drake May. Not saying that Drake May is not anywhere near overhyped. He's nowhere near that. But I think people will keep that talk at bay of, him being an elite quarterback at least until later this season. 49ers versus Seattle. There's a stat that's been going around about 49ers wide receiver Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Basically, over the last 5 years, every quarterback he's played with has won like the MVP or the Super Bowl MVP. In 2020 and 2021, Aaron Rodgers won the regular season MVP. In 2022 and 2023, Patrick Mahomes got an MVP and the Super Bowl MVP. And last season, Josh Allen, got the MVP award. But also on the Seattle side of things, I'm curious to see how this offense will look with Sam Darnold. I think the defense will be pretty good. Their head coach was the Ravens defensive coordinator the year they went to the AFC Championship against Kansas City, which that defense was chef's kiss. So I think their defense will be pretty good. For the 49ers, I just don't trust the 49ers wide receiver room right now. So I think, their wide receivers will struggle to get separation. And, that just, will make a disaster of things. Give me Seattle 28-17. The Titans versus the Broncos. I do believe the Broncos are going to put Titans quarterback Cam Ward just in the blender. The Broncos had a great defense last year, and I believe they'll get off to another good start this year. I do think Cam Ward will show flashes. I think he'll show why he was the number 1 overall pick. He's going to make all the throws you need him to make. He's going to, kind of have that, I guess, nonchalant nature and making things also just look way too easy. But I think his team itself is going to be why I don't think he's just going to, start lighting it up from game one. Give me the Broncos 34-14. Lions versus Packers. This is the game I'm most interested in. Will Micah Parsons be able to play? After Green Bay made that trade, I saw some reports basically saying that they didn't fully know the extent to his injury. And so, I've heard from basically, you saw something on social media, basically their head coach, Matt LaFleur, basically saying that he's trying to do everything he can to be able to rehab and be able to play. So we will see. And with the Lions, losing both their coordinators, I still think they're going to be a good team. They've got a lot of talent. They were like next man up mentality all of last season, and they still had a good season. They've got all their key pieces, which will get them far. But I think the Lions will lose this game 27-20. I think the Lions will really miss Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, at least to start the season, until, the offense and defense, hit their stride. Texans versus the Rams. If the Rams quarterback, Matt Stafford, is truly healthy, I believe the Rams will have a good season. I think sometimes people forget that they were actually very, very close to beating the Eagles. I believe it was Jalen Carter. Yes, he made the play of the game. He made a hell of a play, and I will never take that away from him. But that team, last year, their defense was, catching fire at the right time. They made, the Vikings just look like little kids, like a little league team just from, the Vikings were dominating last season, and then once they got to the playoffs, they just were like crap in the bed type stuff. So I think the, Rams, they've got Puka Nacua, they've got Devontae Adams, they've got, just decent weapons, all around. They've got Kyron Williams, a good running back. They got a great defensive line, and just overall great defense. I think the Texans also have an amazing defense, which I think it'll keep them in every game. I don't think the Texans are going to get blown out at all this year. If they do, it's going to be because something crazy has happened, like something went wrong. But I don't think the Texans are going to be able to handle the Rams' defensive line, simply just because the Texans' offensive line has kind of been the problem since CJ Stroud has kind of like taken over. Good everywhere else, just the offensive line has kind of been the weaker position group, in my opinion. I believe the Rams' defensive line will win in this game, getting to the quarterback, getting to CJ Stroud, making life tough for CJ Stroud. Give me the Rams 21-10. I believe both defenses will keep this game low scoring. Sunday Night Football. Ravens versus the Bills. This is going to be the battle of the MVP / who should have gotten it. Taking as much as my bias out of the equation, no matter who wins this game, if the Bills win this game, people are going to say, oh yeah, Josh Allen should have won the MVP last year. He just beat Lamar Jackson. And then I already know Ravens fans, or just let's just say the other side of the MVP equation, they're going to say, yeah, Lamar Jackson deserved the MVP last year. He was pissed that he didn't get the MVP. Which, yes, I am of the belief that Lamar Jackson should have gotten the MVP. And the award has been kind of controversial over the last couple of years. I think they need to, I don't know, maybe just add some clarification to it. Like maybe like add some stipulations, like something that's just like a little bit more clear, just to be consistent with the award. Because like some years it's like some people get it off of stats, and then like there's like that guy who basically just gets snubbed every year. So like I don't know. So that's why I'm saying I think they need to make the award a little bit more specific. But I would imagine both Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, they would much rather be holding up a Super Bowl MVP trophy. I imagine both of them would be like, look, an MVP is nice and all, but we need to beat Kansas City. The Ravens defense has gotten significantly better in the offseason, adding Jair Alexander, Lamar Jackson's teammate in college at Louisville, and they drafted, Malachi Starks from Georgia. The Ravens won't have tight end Isaiah Likely for this game, but they still have a lot of weapons for the Bills to be concerned about. And I do think this game will be a close game. I think this will be kind of the opposite of their first matchup last year, where the Ravens had, just the all-around kind of advantage. I think this will be a dogfight. I think this is going to be a close game. I think both teams on both sides of the ball are going to make great plays, whether it's going to be, on offense or on defense. I will take the Ravens because my prediction is they will win 30-23. I believe the Ravens will get a key turnover late to help them just run out the clock. They're a team that can for sure run out the clock, one of the best of them, just because you've got Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Yep, give me the Ravens. And then lastly, the Vikings versus the Bears, Monday Night Football. I think these two teams are two teams that basically a lot of people are excited for, myself included. I think Ben Johnson will help the Bears so much this year where they were bad last year. If I had to try to limit myself to just three things that just the Bears did last year that maybe just be like, what the hell are you doing? Number one is clock management. Clock management alone could have won the Bears a couple more games. I think, like play calling, in certain games also, was just bit the Bears in the butt. And I would say number three, I feel like they were just Caleb Williams was not set up to succeed last year, so kind of just the overall coaching room and how Caleb Williams' rookie season was handled was just unheard of. Like he had nobody to show him how to watch film as an NFL quarterback, a rookie. He basically had to watch it by himself. So like you're not going to really improve, especially as a rookie quarterback watching film by yourself. Now if you're Tom Brady in year 20, yeah, you might not have to watch film with your coaches, even though I'm sure he probably did. But my biggest thing for the Bears is I hope they don't run too many trick plays. I don't really think they have the team to do that as consistently as, say, like the Lions did last season. And I think, if they do the pre-snap motion a lot, I think that is something that they can, do a lot and just be amazing at it. And for the Vikings, well, they commit to running the ball because in the preseason a lot, they had, multiple 3 tight end sets. They're not really in the shotgun a lot. They're JJ McCarthy's under center. So I even know that, yes, it doesn't mean that Justin Jefferson's, stats will be truly affected just because, JJ McCarthy's under center. But I do think that the reason why they're going with more of a under center approach is just because it kind of seemed like that's what JJ McCarthy's game was in college, where, was, kind of gave more run looks than pass looks. But I'm going to take the Bears to win this game 24-17. I believe the Bears will come out strong to start their season. I believe, the identity that the Bears have been trying to build, that culture shock, that culture change, it will be noticeable on Monday night, compared to last, because the Bears started out great last season, then we know what happened to have them collapse. I don't think the Bears are going to have a repeat of last season in regards of starting out strong and then just going through the blender, going through despair and hell, stuff like that. I think the Bears will have a fairly consistent season. I think they'll be in a lot of their games. I think they have a chance to potentially upset some teams that you would not expect them to. So give me the Bears 24-17. And that's all I really have for this episode. I'm not going to do like a playoff bracket, things in that situation, just because I don't want to do that. I think it's too early for me specifically. I think that, if anything, after this week, I'll have kind of like my top 10 teams and give a reason for it, and that's how I'll give my rankings. But I think as of right now, I think my rankings would kind of just be, of course, your Eagles, you're going to have your Chiefs, you're going to have the Ravens, you're going to have the Bills, you're going to have the Lions, you're going to have the Rams. I think some of those teams are definitely some of the better teams in the NFL. Those would be toward the top of my rankings, because I always believe that if a team wins the Super Bowl, they're the number one team until they get beat. And so now I get it. A lot of teams have that Super Bowl hangover, and so then they're not going to be as strong the year before. But as of right now today, I'd say the Eagles are the current best team in the NFL without seeing them play down to football. By Sunday, that answer could easily change. I can admit that. But I just want to thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, because all of that means a lot. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Peace out.